now let's head on over to the topics that we are going to explore tonight. Financial experts discuss Malaysia's wage crisis. I think some, if not most of you, know that on Monday, 7th of August, I conducted a Twitter space featuring two financial experts, and we talked extensively about Malaysia's current wage crisis. So, if you missed the session, this session tonight is basically just a quick summary of what we discussed during the hour and 40-minute session previously. Then we will settle on US inflation spikes but remains well below expectations. What are its impacts on the Malaysian market, the Malaysian ringgit, as well as the global market? Yeah, this and more in our weekly analysis. As usual, not financial or legal advice. Quick shout out to all our current learners and gatherers, our Patreons. Thank you all so much for your support. Allow me to start with Andrew, Wendy, Edward, Alex, Sissy, Is, Morpheus, Urshad, Caveman Balls, Calvin Kai, Thien, Tommy, Jinkang, Adrian, Eric, JS, Wenyan, Dean, Duhan, Ken, Faris, and Alan, as well as all of our learner members. Yeah, so let's dive right into it. On Monday, you may have missed something important, 7th of August. I invited Han Liu, founder, ex-CEO of Ringgit Plus, currently the startup founder of Halogen Capital. And next up, I also invited Mr. Sani Hamid. He's an economist, certified financial planner. He has over 30 years of experience in the financial markets. And our discussion centered upon the recent wage report released by the Department of Statistics, highlighting the alarming wealth gap between the rich and the poor. We also address the question of whether Malaysians are underpaid and the possible solutions that can be implemented in order to resolve this crisis. And finally, we settle on investing in general. What are the details that newbies should look out for and how to really plan their personal finance journey right? And for those of you guys who have missed the session, the full replay is now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Later, after this session itself, I will show you guys where to access the Spotify link. So yeah, I started off the session on Monday very broadly, yeah, labeling the worrying data posed by the Department of Statistics, which was 2 to 3 weeks ago. Median salary year over year in March rose 8.3% from 2,400 ringgit to 2,600 ringgit. Meanwhile, looking across genders, male was earning slightly higher compared to female at 2,664 compared to 2,545. Looking across ethnicities, Chinese people recorded the highest median monthly wages of 4,000 ringgit. Meanwhile, other ethnicities, they are currently at the lowest 2,000 ringgit per month. So far, the data itself is kind of like the bright side, right? But the reality is very gloom, very dark. In fact, a staggering 35% of the population is currently earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month. Yeah, and you take a look at this distribution over here, right? It decreases exponentially as the salary figure increases, where the expectation is sort of like this, right? But it abruptly skews towards the rich. And this really highlights the alarming wealth gap between the rich and the poor, right? And also another statistic that wasn't mentioned here is that more than 8 in 10 people of formal workers, formal employees, they have a salary of less than 5,000 ringgit per month. So just imagine that lah, over 80% of Malaysians, their salary is below 5K. So I decided to ask the speakers, are we in a wage crisis right now? Yeah, no doubt, right? And are Malaysians severely underpaid? And both of the speakers immediately agreed and said that, yeah, we are currently in a wage crisis. Because how do we know if we are in this crisis is we take a look at the cost of living versus income. Okay, so if your income, your median income of 2,600 ringgit is not enough to cover the cost of living, then every month you will start to incur debt. And that itself is really the crisis already, right? And median salary of 2,600 ringgit per month, it means that half of the population is earning above 2.6K, while the remaining half is earning below this amount. And Han said that the statistics that came out was for the formal sector, i.e., people who are currently in full-time employment or part-time employment, but overall they are in a gainful employment. So what about the people in the informal sector? Right? We're not even taking a look at those people who aren't registered with EPF yet. And the data or statistics there is equally, if not more worrying. Yeah. Compared to Singapore, right? Singapore's median salary is almost 2 times higher compared to our median salary. Dollar for dollar, their median salary is 5,000 Sing per month as of 2022. and their cost of living is also much lower. Yeah, if you go to Singapore recently, I think you guys will know also. Her hawker centers, you buy a plate of mixed rice, yeah, 2 to 3 vegetables, including meat, it will cost roughly $3 to $4 Sing dollars. Right, meanwhile, in KL, I'm currently living in KL, right? To buy that same plate of mixed rice, although it's a bit more delicious, okay, gotta admit that, it easily can go to double digits already, 10, 11, or even 12 ringgit, right? That just shows how high the cost of living currently is in Malaysia versus the median salary of 2,600 ringgit. And we're not even talking about rental, yeah, utilities, etc., right? So how to tell if Malaysians are underpaid? Yeah, this one we also kind of discussed in detail last week in our previous weekly analysis. Single car owner, now this is from EPF's Belanjawan study. A single car owner requires 2,600 ringgit per month. Meanwhile, Bank Negara Malaysia's recommended living wage is also pretty close at 2,700 ringgit per month. Okay, so this study itself from Bank Negara Malaysia and EPF, right, assumes that it is sufficient to live a meaningful life. Okay, but I decided to put it to the speakers as well, 2.6K to 2.7K per month, even enough to survive or not. Can Malaysians afford to save? Because honestly, at this stage, I don't think it's enough. I think for single people who own a car and they want to pay rent, the minimum salary should be about 3.3K to 3.5K. But let's just assume, for this example's sake, let's just assume that it is just sufficient to live a meaningful life for single people, right? If you take a look at married couples with 2 children, they require at least 6,890 ringgit per month to live a meaningful life from EPF's Belanjawan study over here. Okay. And now, with the average income of 2.6K, assuming that each spouse or each partner works and earns this amount, you multiply it by 2, it only adds up to about 5,200 ringgit, which is much lesser compared to EPF's study for married couples with 2 children of at least almost 7,000 ringgit per month. And if you think, yeah, if we think that we can't survive with 2,600 ringgit already, which honestly, it's not really livable, this amount puts you at the 50th percentile, Yeah, then again, it's median salary, right? What about the rest of the 50% of the population below this salary? How can they survive? Okay. And this is when Hann stepped in. He said, don't be discouraged. Yeah, even though your current salary is below the median amount of 2,600 ringgit, if you live like someone who earns 2,400 ringgit, so let's say your current salary is about 2.6K, right? And you live below your means, you live like someone who earns 2.4K. That's 200 ringgit saved per month. That's 200 ringgit extra. And all these little amounts will go a long way to your financial freedom. With 35% of the population earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month, the reality of the crisis becomes quite concerning. How did we even get here in the first place? And what are the sustainable solutions to this crisis that government officials should undertake? So we are going back to the root of the issue itself, right? And both of the speakers agreed that it is due to inconsistency and deterioration in education. Poor matching of skills required in the workforce versus skills that were taught. You take a look at the current education system, right? Is it fulfilling the global demand? Like, for example, the global demand currently is AI, right? Trend AI is increasing exponentially, right? Is the current education system catering towards AI or not? And I can say, I don't think so, okay? Poor execution of policies. Plans were always great when proposed, but the execution is usually the opposite. Yeah, when someone gets elected, they always like to show you all the wonderful plans, right? But afterwards, the execution is a whole other different story. Political instability, poor governance, scandals, corruption, frequent change of government. I think we are all more than familiar with this, okay? We've changed our prime ministers 4 times in the past 2 to 3 years in the COVID pandemic, right? Imbalance between demand and supply, this one was mentioned by Mr. Sani. Give you an example. Market is currently saturated with lawyers. It means it's a high supply of lawyers, but insufficient law firms to accommodate all this demand, right? And as I mentioned just now, the AI trend, right? Which is why you kind of have very uneven salary distributions. Education, the solution here, education is key to higher wages. If skills are taught to match the higher income workforce, then salary will grow. Yeah, like I mentioned just now, if education system starts to adhere to the current trends or the current demands, then we will produce employees who will meet the current trends, right? And at the end of the day, the salary will grow. Government officials need to structure the economy in order to absorb the supply. Yeah, basically different types of policies need to be enacted in order to ensure that employees do not get exploited. Yeah, so minimum wage does more harm than good to skilled workers. Yeah, so uh, for now, the minimum wage in Malaysia is currently set at 1,500 ringgit per month. And you can look at this data from Rafizi Ramli, right? How worrying it is. Perlis, Kelantan, and Sabah only slightly above this minimum wage of 1,500 ringgit per month. And this is good for blue collar workers, unskilled blue collar workers, right? Because at least they have a set amount of pay that employers have to meet. But if you're a skilled employer, a doctor, lawyer, engineer, programmer, this minimum wage may do more harm than good because employers tend to use it as a frame of reference. They use it as an anchor. So let's say a student who has studied 4 years in engineering came out as a junior engineer, their starting salary is 2.6K and they're shocked because it's so low, right? And employers say that, hey, it's actually much higher than a minimum wage of 1,500 ringgit already. Be satisfied with your current pay. So that is the issue here itself, right? Which may be one of the root causes of the wage crisis that we are currently seeing. So the solution to this wage crisis is to implement a progressive wage system similar to Singapore in order to resolve this crisis. But what are the impacts on the economy, i.e. on prices and inflation? So Mr. Sani said that low wages can stifle growth as a large part of GDP is based on consumer spending. Therefore, if you start to raise the salary of Malaysians, it can actually be beneficial to Malaysia's economy. Yeah, because consumers spend more and at the end of the day, the GDP will grow as well. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we increase the productivity of citizens as well. A progressive wage does not only increase the salary of employees, but it also increases productivity. So just an example over here, in Singapore, you start with a general cleaner. So assuming that you wipe tables first, keep the plates, then you level up into a toilet cleaner, then you go to a machine operator, and finally a general manager. And you notice, right, each of these steps requires more and more skills. And at the same time, the employer pays you more and more. So that's what it means by a progressive wage system. They reward workers as they progress along their career, ensure that they contribute more to the economy. But this system only targets blue collar, lower wage earners. For higher wage skilled workers, right, we need to unionize them. That means the Malaysian Employers Federation, MEF, right, needs to come in, the government needs to come in and protect employees from being exploited, especially for the high skilled worker sector. Right. So next question, I decided to take it into a more personal perspective. What can we as citizens do in order to lessen the impact of the wealth gap on ourselves, especially for those who are currently earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month? Yeah, so let's say you just nice, you meet the median salary, yeah, 2,600 ringgit, or maybe you're even below the median salary or below 2,000 ringgit per month, which is quite worrying. What can we do in order to climb out of this poverty sinkhole? Yeah, first of all, be eager to learn and upskill yourself. Never be stagnant. Acquire new skills. Be more efficient at your work. Then you can negotiate a better salary from your employer. You don't need to rely on a progressive wage model implemented by the government. You don't need to wait for the government because we know that every time they propose something, the implementation is a whole different story. You can actually implement the progressive wage model on yourself. And you can start by learning how to be better at what you are currently doing. So say if you're a cleaner, analyze which areas you can improve the system, climb the ranks, like the example I gave you just now. If you're a clerk, learn about basic accounting, learn about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all these basic skills, right, that can help you negotiate a better salary. And at the end of the day, if your employer doesn't want to pay you a better salary despite you having a better skill, don't worry, have confidence on yourself, set your targets high, seek an employer that appreciates your talents, or better yet, go to a foreign country and work. Yeah, so I have quite a few friends, right? They worked in Malaysia for 2 to 3 years. Their salary was kind of like stagnant, never really increased also, 2 to 3K per month. Then they decided to go to Singapore and work. Immediately, their salary was the same amount, but in Sing dollars. And over the years, right, their salary increased by 8 to 10% every year. Yeah, so this is one of the solutions lah, in order to climb out of the poverty sinkhole. Learn alternative ways to increase your income. Yeah, this one is pretty much self-explanatory. And another method to transition out of this salary range or lessen the wealth gap is to invest right. And on this topic, what should people look out for if they are absolute beginners? What are the most common do's and don'ts? Yeah, so we are going back to the basics over here. Financial planning 101. Yeah, and from a financial planner standpoint, what is the most important thing? Yeah, this is what I asked those two speakers. So first of all, ensure that you have a monthly surplus, i.e., you are spending less than you earn, than you're earning. Okay. So let's say every month currently you're incurring debt. That means you're spending more than you earn. You need to at first learn how to spend less than you earn. Yeah, save no matter how small the amount, maybe 50 ringgit to 100 ringgit per month, and then gradually save into your emergency funds. At least 6 months, that's the recommended figure. Right? If you think this figure is too high, just make sure you have a bit of funds, maybe 1,000 ringgit lying somewhere. In case when an emergency really happens, you do not need to liquidate your investments. Yeah, because investments, you need to give it time and the power of compounding, right? You don't want to really touch it all the time. And if you don't have emergency fund, you have to dip into your investments. That's really the worst opportunity to do so. Okay. Make sure you have an insurance at least. Now, this one, a lot of people still refuse to get insurance because sometimes it can get quite costly, right? These days, having insurance, it costs about 2 to 300 ringgit per month. Just make sure you at least have medical insurance. In case should something bad happens to you, you get dengue fever, you are hospitalized. Okay, and these days it costs 8 to 10,000 ringgit to go to a hospital to get hospital treatment, right? And if you don't have emergency funds to cover that, you have to liquidate your investments, which is really what you don't want to do. Okay. So make sure you tick all these three boxes first. Then only you start to explore investing in the market. And when you explore investing, learn those low risk funds first, yeah, cash apps, fixed deposits, ASB, ASM, EPF. Only go to high risk options such as US stocks, US ETFs, crypto, yada yada. Okay. So that's basically it for the questions that I discussed with the speakers during the hour and 45-minute session. So the last topic for the night is talking a bit about US inflation. It has spiked but remains well below expectations. US inflation rose in July after 12 straight months of declines. Overall CPI spiked to 3.2% compared to last month's figure of 3.0%. But it's still kind of good news because it's below analyst expectations of 3.3%. Meanwhile, core inflation in the US matched the smallest monthly increase in nearly 2 years, but inflation is still well above the Fed's target goal of 2%. Despite this, economists are expecting it to continue to trend downwards. So if you don't know what I just said just now, right, if you think it's a lot of jargon, right, um, if you want to take a look at how the Malaysian market as well as the Malaysian ringgit will perform, right, you have to analyze the US Federal Reserve's decisions. Okay, how they have been raising or lowering interest rates, whether they are pausing interest rates or whatnot, right? And a good indicator on how aggressive the Federal Reserve will be is US inflation. Okay, and you take a look at the trend of US inflation compared to July 2022, it has been steadily trending downwards. Yeah, July 2022, I think the peak was like 9 to 10%, somewhere along those lines, which is why the Federal Reserve has been gradually reducing their aggressiveness. Yeah, from 75 basis point hike to 50 basis points, and the more recent meeting, they go for 25 basis point hike, right? And all this is actually good news for the Malaysian ringgit, yeah, because it drives away demand from the US dollar back towards our local markets. You can see over here, US dollar more recently, especially when the Federal Reserve and you see inflation trending downwards, also Federal Reserve being less aggressive, the ringgit has strengthened by quite a significant sum against the US dollar. Okay, so reaction of this announcement on the markets, markets slid slightly. S&P fell 0.75% on Friday's close, or the dollar edged higher to 4.5775. Yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation for tonight. All right, guys. Good night. Stay safe. Bye.